Oh, this one hurt.
Can't keep getting away with it!
Sorry, I couldn't resist. A question. Who holds superheroes accountable? Why do they get to be seemingly above the law while other people get punished for lesser crimes? How far can man go in obsessing over the spandex before he loses sight of the life he could have been living? These are just some of the questions that sit at the heart of this episode of Invincible, and I loved it. We watch one of Omni-Man's victims try to fight for his vision of justice only to lose sight almost immediately, costing him everything and traumatizing Mark in what feels like a bi-weekly event. This shouldn't excite me as much as it did, but man, the writing for this one is just so good. So we might as well discuss.
All I want is
God, where to even begin with this thing? Well, I think the first thing to come to mind is just, this episode is a great culmination for a lot of the themes that have been present throughout this season. From humanizing the supervillains to the issues of accountability for super beings and the pitfalls of holding a black and white moral worldview, this episode really brings all these ideas home in one perfect test case for how complicated things are, but how that doesn't make what they feel any less real. Powerplex, played phenomenally by that guy who says bitch a lot in Breaking Bad. Like Aaron Paul, fantastic performance. He truly kills it here. Amazon, for as much as I don't like celebrity voice casting, and Amazon loves it, they do pick the right people nearly every time for every role. Even if the role is being a creep. But this episode might be my favorite of the season unless the next two do something absolutely insane. As just from a pathos standpoint, this episode does a great job at showing us the life of Powerplex, making us empathize with him while also showing that this man is clearly having a mental health crisis. We start the episode seeing his life before Omni-Man splattered his family harder than his own son. He seemed like a normal dude in spite of having powers. He loved his sister and niece, but then Omni-Man did what he did, leaving Scott emotionally destroyed as he sees the broken bodies of his family. Now, the thing I love about the initial presentation for Scott is that he doesn't immediately go on the warpath. He doesn't just hop into a lab, grab the nearest experimental tech, go crazy from it, and just villain forever after. No, instead, he waited. He tried to build a case. He wanted to just open something up to investigate Invincible and just get some kind of justice or closure for what happened. We see from the pictures that he didn't immediately go after Invincible. This is Mark in the blue costume, so this is fairly recent. He took at least a year to get this whole thing going, proving that yeah, he did try to do things through the proper channels. He channeled his hurt into something that could be considered productive, creating a petition that just didn't go anywhere. And you get it because from his perspective, Invincible seemed to be just getting away scot-free from everything, and he doesn't understand why. At least that's how it seems at first. We, as an audience, understand that Cecil already knows everything. He knows why Omni-Man did what he did. He knows Mark didn't ask for this smoke, and despite being given every chance, he still refused to join his dad. As far as Cecil and the government was concerned, Mark may be a problem worth having contingencies for, but he's not in any immediate danger of flipping. So, when combined with wanting to keep Mark around to fight Viltrum, no shit, Cecil wasn't gonna hold a public trial. There's nothing that'll come out of it that he doesn't already know. It would just serve to emotionally distress the asset he's trying to keep on his side. And most importantly, it would be a bad look for Cecil and the GDA. As if it came out that Cecil knew and has always known Omni-Man was an alien invader, well, that would get his and the GDA's legitimacy questioned, creating chaos and a loss of faith. When Cecil wants calm, and forever signs his checks for his instant teleportation thing to keep signing them instead of caving to their constituency. It is not in Cecil's interest to hold a trial for Mark. But for those who lost their family in this incident, it does seem kinda sus. Why wasn't there a greater investigation to what happened? Why didn't Invincible be brought on trial and forced to ask questions about what really happened with his dad? Something fishy is going on, and they're right. Just not about Mark. And one would think that this lack of closure is what made all these negative emotions start to fester in Scott till his confusion and slightly off-based anger became a grudge. However, even before he starts juicing, you can see how he became Invincible's second biggest hater. Getting pissed at just how Mark can break into the GDA, do probably billions of dollars worth of damages, then just walk away, with everyone else having to pick up the pieces. To Scott, this is just another case of Invincible not being held accountable and that he needs to take matters into his own hands. picking back the layers of the show, how he's initially presented versus what you find out he actually does, you realize just how blinded by anger he is and how he can't see the nuances of the situation. And that's less understandable in his case because, well, he works for fucking Cecil. Loki, the most unbelievable thing about this episode is Cecil not monitoring all of his employees enough to know that Scott tried to investigate Invincible. That this man might be a liability and have to be kept under surveillance or maybe fired. However, since he's here and he has access to a lot of the tapes, he has so much more insight than anyone in the public. This dude knows why Invincible is being given so much slack. Not to mention he has the fucking tapes to prove that Omni-Man used his son to make ground beef. If he were just a civilian, him having all this confusion and anger, it would make complete sense. But he's a Fed, so Scott knows everything. He knows about Viltrum, Anissa, how Invincible didn't flip even when his dad caved in his teeth, yet he's still a hater. Scott, rather than allowing this information to change his perspective, instead only acknowledges the things that validate his pre-existing beliefs. That Invincible can do whatever he wants, like invade the Pentagon and get away with it, and sees that as an injustice, even as the other example of like, oh, they're putting down the little guys, like he's like in some special class of his own. The other example like, oh, them putting us down is something that he is fully fucking guilty of. Donald is asking about the inventory he stole, but Scott wants to make this all about Invincible, as to him that is the thing that is really wrong with the world, and that is the source of all of his pain. With those around him like his wife feeding into that vendetta, this selective listening culminates in the end where he still blames Mark for the death of his family, even though Powerplex is the one that killed his wife and kid. He's locked into this worldview as he's too far in, and thinking any other way would cause him to crumble from the guilt. This idea of nuance and things being a matter of perspective is illustrated beautifully by the presence of Oliver, who, still being an alien child, grapples with the way people see his dad versus how he knew him. To Oliver, his dad was a great guy, his mom loved him, so the idea of his own experiences and feelings not lining up with other people's is just a confusing concept. Mark and Eve try to explain that, yeah,
what's 17 more years? I can always start again. Make another kid.
Nolan was complicated, that just because he gave Oliver uppies doesn't mean the thousands of people he killed on the planet, not to mention the billions he took off-world, don't get to factor into the equation. What he's done doesn't get washed away just because he feels sorry about it. It's a cold comfort to his victims that the guy who wiped out a city block to prove his point suddenly wants to do better. With the important thing here and the lesson for Oliver being the nuance of the situation. That there is no true right or wrong, just people with feelings grappling with how to react to an atrocity, with those positive memories of the aggressor having to be balanced out by the experiences of others who suffered because of him. Oliver may love his dad, he may want to rehabilitate Omni-Man's image, people are gonna feel a certain kind of way about him rocking his dad's merch, and they're not wrong for feeling that. With Powerplex being an example of someone who said, fuck that shit, I'm right. Refusing to have empathy for Mark in this situation, that Mark is as much his father's victim as Powerplex, Scott just takes it upon himself to punish Invincible for what he's done. Not to bring him to justice like he keeps ranting about, but to punish him. As, let's be real, if he got what he wanted, Invincible, beaten up and tried in court, that court would have probably found him innocent. Even if Cecil doesn't rig it. So Powerplex's plan, his real plan, is just to kill Invincible, betraying his own rationale, just like how at the end, he betrays his own idea of accountability by still blaming Mark for the death of his wife and kid, using Mark as an outlet for all of his frustration, just like he's always done. Being mad at Mark for the death of his loved ones, a system that would rather shield Mark than rake him across the coals with a trial and air out its own dirty laundry. Powerplex's feelings are valid, but his actions are misguided, just like Mark's real #1 hater, who we'll get to. I think the other big recurring theme that I love about this episode is how it explores the idea of life with and without the cape. Now, to many heroes, the job may seem all-consuming, but it's the more personal moments that make life truly fulfilling. We see this in Mark's relationship to his fam. The boyfriend's awkwardly trying to find his place in this house of supers, and Debbie's assuring him that it's all okay. That their life may seem unimportant compared to what they have going on, but they still matter. That these bonds and moments are what truly count. This is what superheroes are supposed to protect, that, which is why Powerplex losing sight of his own family is such a tragedy. Not gonna lie, I spent this entire episode on the edge of my seat waiting for him to accidentally kill someone. It just made too much sense that an antagonist clearly in the middle of a mental health crisis, ranting about avenging the unseen and the forgotten, would accidentally kill someone, turning them into the thing they claim to be fighting. Powerplex may talk about being calm and not wanting to hurt anyone, but his actions do tell a different story, and they've always told the same one. Like, to get his first big power boost, he jumps off a 20-story building into a busy street. Dude got lucky that he didn't crush someone or land on a car. It was also luck that his breakout didn't kill any of the guards or someone else on the road. That car was out of control, and bad things could have happened if anything else had gone differently. So we're always waiting. It's like, it's coming, they're edging it, and then we get to that final horrifying moment where his attempts to kill Invincible leads him to just cook his family. I knew it was coming, but even then, oof, this hurt. I love the way this episode handles Powerplex. It makes him more than just a madman on a revenge quest, but shows us how he got this way, the mentality that trapped him there, and those that just kept feeding into that anger, and how he is fully responsible for this, but he's also, again, having a mental health crisis. It's not treated as a joke or a villainous thing, but a tragedy where you understand him, you understand why this has happened, even if at the end of the day, like in my case, you kind of just pity him. I think this whole confrontation, how it ends, it hammers home to Mark the folly of just locking away your problems and throwing away the key. He's forced to confront a supposed villain and see him for the emotional wreck that he is. Even if he did bad things, Mark does hope that Powerplex can be rehabilitated and put on a better path. This mindset probably won't apply to Sinclair, but Darkwing certainly. Powerplex, just like Mark, wanted to see the world in black and white. Because life's a bitch and Mark's its favorite punching bag, he's forced to see just all the shades of gray. His ending is also interesting to me, as I'm not fully certain that Mark took away the best lesson from this interaction, which I love. As Mark explains, originally he didn't want to be consumed by guilt, so he tried not to dwell on the collateral damage of his and his dad's actions, that he wanted to focus on the lives he could save, not the ones he's lost. Which, as far as superhero mentalities go, probably the healthiest one he's gonna get. But Mark decides, I'm going to try and remember what happened. I'm not just going to forget, I'm going to remember those that I've hurt, only for Powerplex to spit in his face, making Mark the hypothetical Omni-Man in this situation, where he talks about being sorry for his actions and that he's learned to be better, only for that to be rejected. In Omni-Man's case, it would be fully warranted, but here, Powerplex is clearly projecting. But Mark's attempts at vulnerability didn't get him much, which is sad, as he's trying to do the right thing, but it didn't work on this particular person. Mark's regret and feelings of guilt over what he did and didn't do have been a huge part of this season, from his leftover guilt for killing Angstrom, seemingly getting him to dig in his heels about being just a moral paragon, explaining why he's freaked out at Cecil for hiring known killers. But I think this whole situation is sad, as Mark, he opened up. He's starting to see the nuance of the situation and is starting to take things personally again, even when it's not really his fault, only for this episode to end with an army of hymns getting ready to attack. Damn. Some of these fits suck. Now, to address the elephant in the room, yeah, I did know the person spying on Mark was Angstrom. I didn't need the subtitles to spoil that for me. Shorts, Twitter, and my comments, who have refused to shut up about the Invincible War, well, they all got there first. But to come clean, yeah, Angstrom survived. Thank you for all the comments. How he survived? Honestly, I don't know. Because he was a puddle last time we saw him. But he's here, so Mark's biggest mentally unstable hater has gathered what looks like a menagerie of alternate Marks to get revenge on our Mark. Now, this plan is insane for a couple reasons. First being, we've actually seen some of these boys before. The yellow and black one with the cape is the main one I remember. He popped up in Angstrom memories from a different version of himself who was forced to watch his son die. Now, this is kind of crazy because either there's multiple versions of this particular Mark, or Angstrom has been so blinded by hate for our Mark, the hero, that he's willing to work with objectively more evil versions just to get revenge. This speaks again to just how mentally unstable unstable Angstrom is right now, unable to separate the memories and experiences of his many alternate selves to recognize the reality of the situation. Angstrom could have had beef with any of these other marks, but he chose one of the few that didn't turn out to be evil. This is similar to Powerplex's vendetta, where shifting blame onto Mark even when something happened that was kind of their own damn fault. Angstrom nearly had a mental breakdown when Debbie suggested our Mark wasn't a monster, which makes it crazy that he would work with a version that probably killed one of his sons. We've also seen this other one before with the worst color palette and his dogs out, as he killed another Angstrom's partner. All these incidents Angstrom recalls like they happened to him personally, making the fact that he wants to work with them if it means getting revenge, that's something. I don't know how he bribed them to get their help. Maybe these are versions of Mark that lost, or he's just doing the same thing he did with the Maulers, where help me kill Mark and ruin his life, and I'll give you a dimension all to yourself. Not sure, probably one of the two, but all I know for certain though, the next episode is going to be the worst day of Mark's life, as his dad doing all that was bad, but different versions of him doing the same thing, that might tip Mark over the edge. The public will never forgive him for this, and Cecil is about to have a stroke. Maybe Mark should go fight Viltrum just after this, because yeah, the Earth is gonna need a couple years to cool off before they can even consider forgiving him. Now, just a theory craft about what some of these other marks what their deal is. We have Freddie Mercury and the other one rocking Viltrumite colors. Both obviously have taken up with their dad and fully embraced their Viltrumite heritage. The one with a mustache may have even been raised on Viltrum rather than getting a normal life with his mom. I think the messed up one in the back is also rocking Viltrumite colors, so he probably got tortured into being evil, or Mark didn't get rescued when he was getting blasted by lightning in that machine head fight. The one in red looks kinda cool as he's fully wearing Omni-Man's color scheme just on his own costume, with a cape too.
No capes.
Honestly, I think capes look amazing on Mark, just personal opinion. Don't know about these other three, though. The 5-head is... I can't tell if that's actually part of his costume or just a coloring mistake. Though the one with the broken specs is probably a version of Mark that caved when his dad beat him into a pulp on the mountain. One seems to be wearing Bulletproof's costume, which probably a sign that in another dimension, Mark just chose the outfit Mark Hamill originally tried to sell him. Though personally, I think the one that is most interesting to me is the one that seems to be wearing the Thraxan armor. The Thraxans were those interdimensional invaders who Omni-Man sent back to the Stone Age. I wonder if this version of Mark got trapped there instead of his dad, with things just going wrong from there. Can't really say much about the other ones, except this Mark has never gotten a haircut, which is funny because a mohawk is validating that decision perfectly to me. This is truly the most insane lineup Mark has ever faced. No telling how strong any of them are compared to our Invincible, as without the incentive of facing other Viltrumites, who knows how hard any of them actually had to ever train. But even if he is the strongest Mark, that won't do much against numbers like these, so I'm predicting mass casualties once they start invading. All of Earth probably won't be destroyed, but Mark is gonna have to eat his words once Cecil's countermeasures come in clutch. I also see a version of the story where whoever Viltrum was sending joins the fight just to help kill all these other Marks as they want the plan whole, but who knows fully how everything's gonna play out, as this is kind of its own story. I have been told that this is essentially a second draft of the Invincible comics, but I'm still just very excited to see what happens next. Though I think for whatever does happen, I hope the team was given a little bit more time to work on bringing the spectacle this time around. As yeah, the final confrontation for this episode just had a noticeable quality drop towards the end. Like, that is clearly a static image being shaken. They're even doing the hiding the mount trick they called out last season. Here, it doesn't even look like he's taking steps, it's just dragging the PNG, which again, I've accepted Invincible's animation being what it is, but after how emotionally devastating the rest of the episode was, having the climax be where I noticed the quality dropping is just a bit disappointing. Though again, I keep hearing that Invincible had a troubled production schedule, and so no shade to the crew. This, like most animation issues, is rarely due to a lack of talent, but bigger production issues just in the pipeline. Can't really bring their A game when they're not given enough time to work. But to wrap things up,
I f***ing called it!
Ray quit. It hurt. Great scene though. Ray realizes that she doesn't want to keep risking her life, preferring that she has a chance to live it instead. Now, to Spider-Man, this would be blasphemous. However, I think it makes perfect sense in the context of Ray's story. She never chose this life. She was forced to be a hero by her parents. Nearly dying just gave her the kick in the pants to just decide to rethink her life and decide how she wants to spend it. She doesn't hate the civilians, she doesn't hate saving people, but she believes that all these heroes are just doomed to die in the line of duty, and after what we've seen, she's kind of right. Her wanting to quit makes perfect sense, just like Rex wanting to stay. And I do love the flip they do for the dual identity trope with Rex. As to him, he's just Rexplode. He doesn't have another him. There's just the hero, as that's all he's ever known ever since his parents apparently sold him to the government. Rex can't imagine a life without this, but in a moment of growth that really brings home just how sad I'm gonna be when he dies, he still understands Rey's position. He doesn't want Rey to leave, he has feelings for her, but he respects her feelings and is letting her go even if he wants to be with her. Rex and Rey have been cute together all season. I was right about Rey being set up to leave the job, and really I'm just hoping that Rex leaving life won't come to pass, as he is too much of a gem to lose, but that's definitely why it's gonna be him, as yeah, we're facing 15 Invincibles, so somebody has to die to make a threat of this caliber live up to the threat level we know an evil Mark can present. If nobody we care about gets offed, I'm calling bullshit. Rudy and Monster Girl scene was also cute, bringing up the whole, yeah, superheroes should have lives outside of being superheroes, and Rudy, by fixing Monster Girl's whole de-aging thing, has given her her life back. It's crazy how much more endearing I find these two couples versus the one that mainly sits on the roof. Also, Amber came back. I appreciate that they don't just throw her character away, but her only appearing in the context of showing it's yeah, Amber is okay with the whole breakup and Eve situation. That being the only context we see her, I do find a little bit annoying. Also knowing how it keeps reminding us oh yeah, her and Mark did have chemistry, which just draws attention to how it's lacking in other places. I kinda like how Mark initially refused to fight Powerplex, as at one point you could say this is negligence, and him not wanting to deal with a problem. But to be fair, there are so many other superheroes in this world, him deciding to let someone else deal with it is kind of funny. Though I do think there probably should be an app for these things where people can call out dibs, as it'd be messed up if all the other superheroes assumed Mark had this, leaving Powerplex to keep staying around looking like a jackass. Overall, this was a fantastic episode. It asked so many great questions that have always been a thing in superhero stories, but rarely getting treated with this level of care. Invincible loves to take that extra step to its world building, thinking about how certain superpowers will interact, and it also applies that same philosophy to the characters. How would someone react if their family was lost due to a fight between a hero and a villain? How it is a little bit messed up that superheroes seem to get to be above the law in some cases. This episode doesn't really have any strong answers about how the world should be, and I think that's part of the point. This world is complicated. Everyone is just reacting to the things around them, with that chaos creating moments of bliss as well as horror. Sometimes there is no right or wrong answer. You may not always be able to reason with everybody, but that doesn't make the pain any less real. Terrible choices were made, but you get why they were made, and this sincere style of writing is what always makes Invincible hit for me. That and the violence, which I am sure there is going to be so much of next episode. And this excites me.